Welcome to Elevate. I'm your host, KAren Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, host of ATP Media, Accentuate the Positive Media, on a Sunday afternoon, evening in the States, Monday morning in Australia. As you can see, I'm Australian, and we're going to chat about the afterlife again today. You're listening to Elevate on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM syndicated radio, all over the place, streaming on around 8 different internet platforms today. And, well, as you know, for many of you, let me get rid of this. There we go. As you know, it was exactly a week ago today, on September 10th in the United States, but it was actually September 11th here in Australia, which was interesting. Charlie Kirk left the planet. Carolann, Ida Roller and I were doing Elevate, and just before we went on live, Carolann said she's so devastated because Charlie Kirk had been killed. And I said to her, we were a messenger. Who? Who's Charlie Kirk? And I started scratching my head, and I'm like, I think I know that name. Is that Christian kid that, goes to colleges and talks to people? Didn't know much about him at all. And Carolann's, yes. So we got on and started talking about him. And I have to say, he hasn't left me ever since. He's got a lot to say. So at the time that I was talking about Charlie a week ago, I knew nothing about his message or what he said. I kind of knew that he was a conservative Christian, which doesn't really gel with my ideology, how I view the world, but doesn't mean that I disagree with him at all. But since then, I've done some research into him. But straight away, as soon as I started querying in my head, like, who is he? What does he speak about? He started coming through to me and started talking to me. And I was very skeptical about that. I was thinking, no, surely I'm not talking to this guy. I don't even know him, as if you have to know people to speak to them in spirit, which is kind of interesting. You don't at all. As I said to Carolann last week, the less you know about them, the better, because you haven't got any opinions about them. So during the week, I formed some opinions because I looked him up and started listening to what he said. And he was still talking to me in my head. And I came up with some ideas about what I thought he would say about some of the stuff that he said. But I wanted to make sure that it wasn't my opinion that was overriding what I'm thinking that Charlie Kirk was saying to me. Because as good as a medium as anyone is, or a channel, we're always filtered. It's always filtered through our own mind and our own opinions. There are some channels that are completely moved out of the way so that can't happen, trance channels, for instance. But when you're just like me, when you're awake and you're conscious, it's always filtered through your mind. So that's why I say the least you know about people, the better it is to actually bring through their message, because it's not coming through your opinions. But a lot of what Charlie Kirk was saying, I wasn't aligning with. And I was like, wow. But I just kept looking and looking. And of course, it's all over the news today. They're all talking about the killer and who he was and the text messages. And it's endless, the news about him. I mean, this is not going away anytime soon. As I discussed with Carolann, when you go out in such a big way, it's talked about for decades to come, probably centuries. I don't know how long, but it's talked about. When someone is assassinated like this, it's not something, it's a newsworthy item that just doesn't go away. And so this is what Charlie was saying to me as I was talking to Carolann last week. He was saying it was all prearranged. It was a sacred contract or a sacred agreement. And one of the things that he said was that in life, as in death, he was really passionate about getting attention, getting his message out, getting, being listened to, being heard. And even though I hadn't heard of him and many other people hadn't heard of him, I'm kind of away from the political scene in the United States, here out in Australia. And I'm away from the conservative sort of Christian scene as well, being sort of someone that channels spirit and talks to spirit and talks about spirit guides. I don't think the Christians, come at that too easily. Most of them, many of them, not all of them. But I'm away from that. But a lot of people aren't. So I quizzed him. And I'm like, well, what was this all about? What was this lifetime all about? And he was telling me. And I wanted my opinions to be right. But they weren't necessarily right. Because as I watched some of the things that he said, I'm like, oh, that's a bit harsh. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with this. I'm a bit more. It's funny, in Australia, our political Liberal Party, we call them the Liberals. There's the Liberals and Labor, but the Liberals are the Conservative Party, and Labor are more like what what people in the States call the Liberal Party. So the Labor Party stands for the working man, and it is very much into arts, the arts. They put a lot of money into arts and culture, whereas the Liberal Party here in Australia is more about finance and business, and so it's quite opposed. As I say, the Labor stands up for the working man, and that was back in the day, 100 or so years ago, whenever it was. They were the ones that were very behind the unions, making sure that the working man gets fairly paid and all that sort of stuff. And whereas the Liberals here, the more Conservative Party, are more about propping up big business so that you can employ the working man. Neither are right or wrong. It's just a difference of opinion. But in the States, I notice when I'm watching stuff online that you call the more Labor Party, you call them the Liberals, and it's kind of confusing, because every time I hear people say the Liberals, I'm thinking of our Liberals here in Australia, which are the more Conservative Party. So it gets a little confusing. So it's funny in the States, when you think Liberal and Labor, you think of your opinion, but when you talk to people in other places in the world, that word doesn't stand for what it stands for. So, as I said, let's get back to Charlie and his message and what he wanted to say. I hope I'm streaming. No one's online talking to me. I did mess this up. I put it on for 8:30, where we normally go at 8 a.m. here. So normally Kristin joins me for this time slot. And when I say normally, this is a new show. We've only been going for about 5 or 6 weeks. But she didn't want to talk about this topic either. It was not something that she wanted to talk about, which is fair enough. You either loved him or hated him, but as I'm watching the response across the world, he was so adored and so loved. And I'm chatting to him and asking him about that, and asking him about his very divisive, polarized opinions. And this is what he said to me. He said that in a world such as this, where we're still very divided, and what gets attention is that polarized opinion. When you agree with everybody, you're not going to get a lot of attention. But when you debate people, and he was a very divisive, polarized personality, but he said to me that that was for a purpose, because his mission in this lifetime, and in the afterlife actually, was to get attention to his movement, to his message. And I asked him, because I looked at a lot of things he said online, I asked him exactly, what is this message that you want to get people listening to? And he said to keep people talking, to not get so fixed in one point of view, and to get debate happening, to get conversations happening, to keep people talking. And I heard him say it online as well. He said, when you stop talking, even in a marriage, that's when the marriage breaks down. And he actually said, when you stop talking, that's when violence happens. And what's kind of ironic is that he was doing exactly that. He was debating people and talking to them when the violence happened. But as I say, he, from that other side, says that that was all orchestrated. Yeah, I'm not going to share too much about the guy that did it. If you have questions about that, you can ask me, but he's giving me information about that, but I'm not going to share too much about that today. As I said, there's no one online. Gee, I hope this is working. So that was what he wanted to do. He wanted to keep people talking and debating. And as I listened to people that knew him, the outweighing comments from people is how much he supported them and their dreams. Like, he was always bolstering people, saying, you can do this. Yep, you can do this. I'm going to support you. You can hear me. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yeah, I can see we've got a few people online. I just was looking at the comments and there were no comments. So I thought, is this working? Because as I said, I put in the wrong time for the streaming. And then I realized 2 minutes before I went live, oh, I put it at half, because the ATP media show goes on half an hour. It goes on in Australia, it goes on at 8:30, and then the Elevate show goes on at 8 o'clock. So I had put it at 8:30 instead of 8 o'clock. So the overarching message was keep talking, keep discussing. Even when you have different points of view, talk about it. Like, why do you have that point of view? Can I find some common ground with that point of view? Because what's happening in this world is the divisiveness, the separation, is that we get fixed in our ideas, fixed in our point of view. Like, my father was very political, and he always voted for, as I said, the Conservative Party in Australia, which is called the Liberals. And he was a staunch Liberal man, and he didn't even want to hear what the other side said. This happens, he died over 20 years ago, but this is what happens in politics. You don't even want to hear what they have to say because they're wrong and your side's right. It's the same with sport. It's like we're wrong and the other side's right. You want to stick to our point of view. But the overarching message that he was bringing is to have these debates, to like listen to each other. I have to say, when I was watching him online debate people, I wasn't thinking that he was really listening to what they had to say. He called it a debate, but he had his very strong ideas and point of views, and he just wanted to get across his point of view. So what he's saying, what he's saying is that he had a public persona and he had a personal persona, and he was saying that when he was talking one-on-one with people outside of the public eye, he was much more open to listening. But when he was in the public eye, he would have those ideas changed. And I think a lot of ideas did change, especially towards the end of his life. It's funny to say to someone who's 31 at the end of their life. He had conversations and with people that changed his mind about a lot of things, especially around politics. I don't know too much about religion. He was quite staunch in his point of view around Christianity and religion. But especially around Israel and Jewish people, it's kind of funny because he was someone that was always saying, Christ is Lord, Christ is King, Christ is our Savior, he's going to save you. And from my perspective, from the spiritual perspective, the secular spiritual perspective, the non-religious spiritual perspective, Christ says to me, nobody needs saving. I wasn't here to save anybody. I didn't proclaim myself as Lord. This is all very much the Christian vernacular around Christ, that, Christ is Lord, Christ is my Savior. His message, Christ's message, or Jesus's message, was very much look within and find God within rather than find it through me. But the church has said only through me can you find God. So there's a vast difference here. But I asked him about these religious points of view in the afterlife, and he said, in politics today, in the mainstream world today, spirituality is known through the church. If I had said to people that I'm channeling the Arcturians or the Palladians or speaking to my spirit guides, and I wanted to be a voice in politics, people would just throw me out straight away because they not yet have people evolved to that understanding. They understand spirituality through the church. And so he was very much into spirituality, but came at it from this church perspective, this Christian perspective. So the only reason I'm doing this show today is that, as I said, he's been with me ever since last week, pestering me. I had to shoo him away at some stage. He's such a huge energy. So tuning into his energy, and I didn't even deliberately tune into his energy last week. Carolann told me about him. I had some questions. Why did this happen? And as I asked those questions, the answers came, and I thought it was my spirit guides giving me the answers. But this incredible energy came that I didn't really recognize as my spirit guides, and it was him. And then I was querying it and saying, I can't be talking to him, surely. And then my guides popped in and said, why are you questioning this? And so feeling his energy, it's just so huge. And I was thinking, like, why am I feeling the bigness of his energy? Like there's something more going on here than just a political activist, a conservative Christian that was killed. And they were showing me the ramifications of who he is and who he was. and the way that he went out and how it will impact the world. It's one of those events that is going to change the world in a huge way, a bit like Martin Luther King being shot, or we discussed last week, Diana, or September 11. It's funny that it happened around that same time. It's an event like September 11 that's going to change our world, some for the good and some for the bad, depending how you handle trauma. As we've discussed many times on the show, when you go through trauma in your life, it's not sent to punish you. It's sent to help you grow spiritually and to have you go look within and look for the answers within. And how can I be inside this? I've spoken to so many people, especially around grief. In my book, Awakened by Death, let me plug the book. Let me go to media. Where's media? In my book, Awakened by Death, I speak about a lot about how the death experience awakens people to their spiritual transformation or their spiritual journey. And one of the guys in the book, Dave Byron, is an Australian father whose daughter was killed in the Bali bombings. And he said to me, he didn't really have a spiritual awakening. He didn't call it that. But he said to me, after years of grieving and feeling so bad every day, he just couldn't live like that. And taking his life was not an option. He just could not live with the grief. So he made a deliberate decision to think differently. And he said every time he hit a negative thought, instead of grieving the loss of his daughter, he decided to remember a good thing about her that made her laugh. And he practiced that over time. It didn't happen straight away, but he practiced thinking differently until his world became bright again and life was joyous and he was happy and cracking jokes. When I met him at the memorial, actually, and he was standing up talking about this. And I was so impressed with what he said that I had to talk to him. And then his daughter came through and asked me to connect with him, and it was really interesting. We were outside at this memorial, and when he came off stage, people were talking to him, and I didn't want to interrupt him. I thought, no, look, he's busy and he's mourning the loss of his daughter and it's a Memorial Day. I won't interrupt him. So I was turning to go home and somebody came up and grabbed my arm. This is spirit working, I do, and said, did you want to meet Dave Byron? As if they read my mind, because I guess they saw me looking at him. And I said, I did actually. And so they took me up and introduced me to him. But he made this decision through the trauma of the loss of his daughter and through the trauma of the grief that he was experiencing, the negative thoughts that constantly bombarded him day after day after day, that he couldn't live like this anymore. And he decided to change the way he thinks. So that's what trauma does. It gives us a choice. It gives us an opportunity to find the sense of something, to find the purpose in what's happened, or to keep going over the tragedy, the terrible the thing that happened. What's John saying here? We are being told so many stories of what happened to Charlie, more than one person behind this incident. Look, John, absolutely. It's just, when you look online, I go through YouTube, just put in, Charlie Kirk on YouTube, and there's just a million sort of shows and videos come up on it, and people talking about who did it and why he did it and who was behind it and why it happened. Like, everyone's talking about it. This is what happens when we get into the logical mind. And so getting back to Charlie, funnily enough, he's not as present today as he's been all week. Now he shuts up. He's been in my head all week yakking to me. And now I'm online talking to you. No, he says he's here. He says he's here. He's willing to answer any questions that you have, he says. Okay, I've asked him a million questions, so I'm all questioned out. But keep talking, keep debating. Right, so he said, tell them what you did. So when I saw things that he said that I disagreed with, instead of writing him off as someone I disagree with, and this is what we do as humans, like, nope, I don't agree with what he's saying, I kept looking deeper and deeper and deeper. And like, why did he say that? And a lot of people said that he was very hateful and he said terrible things. But when you actually look at what he said, he was rude. I have to say, he was rude. There was one thing, he was debating some woman, she started ranting, and then he just cut her off when she started ranting. Well, I can understand that. I've had that happen a few times. She just started throwing insults at him. You're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. You're not listening to me. Not really asking a question, just ranting. And then these big burly sort of security guards sort of pushed her out of the way, and it looked kind of rude and not very nice. But I guess that when you're trying to speak to thousands of people, there has to be some sort of coordination there. But he had his opinions, and he wanted you to know them. He wanted you to know what he thought. He said it was a debate, but as I watched a lot of his stuff, he wasn't really debating with you. He just wanted to prove you wrong. But he did ask you, prove me wrong, prove me wrong. And I said to him as I watched all this stuff, oh, I would have loved to have had a debate with you. I would have loved to have a debate. What happens when people debate and they come at you with their opinions? They get very emotional about it, emotional in they're sort of like angry that you disagree with them. And when you're in that emotion and you're angry, hey Heidi, how are you? When you're in that anger and emotional, you can't debate with someone in a way that it can be heard. And so what Charlie did is he stayed cool, calm, and collected. He stayed connected to what he believed, and as everyone said, he was very intelligent. And in that intelligence, he was able to just shoot people down. And the people that were wanting to debate him had no hope of getting their point across because they were just emotional. And he was in his sort of logical mind and asking them questions from a logical perspective, and they couldn't come back at him. And he did that over and over and over again. And so as I'm watching this, it looks rude and it looks mean and nasty. But I'm like, why did you do that? And he's saying, makes people think. It makes people reassess how they think. It makes people look at how they present something and how they verbalize what they know. This is really interesting. As somebody that's been on air speaking about spiritual things for a long time, when I work with clients and they have a spiritual awakening, there's a big distance between knowing what you know because you've had a spiritual awakening. Either you've had an NDE or in meditation you've had some spiritual experience, and be able to articulate what that is in a way that it can come across to the other person. This is one of the most difficult things you can do, actually. You can listen to a spiritual teacher or read spiritual books, and you can, or anything really, about anything. It doesn't have to be spiritual, and you can understand it. And then when you try and explain it to somebody, you don't find the words or the vernacular to explain it in a way that you understand it as you're knowing. And that's a skill. That's a real skill. And so he was telling me that. He was telling me that he was teaching these kids, like when they stood up for what they believed in, they didn't have a way of verbalizing to articulate in a way that would come across as a debate that would sound feasible and understandable. And so they'd come away from the exchange thinking, I could have said that better. You know, when you're in an argument with somebody and you're saying things, and then after the argument you said, I should have said this and I should have said that, and I could have got my point across this way and I could have got my point across that way. Basically, that's what he's saying. What he's saying here is his wife going to become much more prominent and well known in the upcoming years. I'm asking him this question because I don't know. And he's saying yes and no. He's saying there's a fire underneath her at the moment, which will burn out for a while as she starts to think more about looking after herself and her children. And but basically, yes, this incident will affect her in ways that will be ongoing, ramifications that will be ongoing. But there is a fire underneath her at the moment where she wants to act from anger, but that will burn out. And then as it sort of simmers down and calms down, she'll get more into the domestic duties of looking after her children and looking after herself. She'll definitely a big force behind whatever, his team gets up to, whatever they do. One thing he does say to me, though, is that, he's not finished with this world, and he'll definitely be back. Let me have a look at what Isabella's saying here. Does Charlie still believe this? I think it's worth to have a cost of some gun deaths every single year so that you can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights to own guns. So I just got no straight away. he's saying to me, this is something that I argued with him about in spirit. I'm having that debate with him in spirit. I'm saying, is this just my opinion coming through, or is this really how you think now? And he said, he reminded me of the conversation I had with Prince after he died. So Prince, according to another medium, was the reincarnation of Saint Germain, which made perfect sense to me. Again, Prince was somebody I paid no attention to when he was alive. It was hard to ignore him because he was everywhere. And when I was growing up, his music was everywhere. But it was not something, I wasn't like a huge raving fan when he came out to Australia. Actually, not long before he died, I remember a girlfriend of mine said, oh, I went to the Prince conference. I'm like, concert. And I said, really? Why? Well, he wasn't something I was tuned into. And then when I spoke to him after he died, I realized he's like this ascended master, and he'd been reincarnated as many different amazing people on earth, one of them Saint Germain. And I'm like, whoa, really? And then when you look, Saint Germain's all about the purple flame, for those people in the spiritual community that understand the purple flame, Saint Germain. And Prince used to wear purple all the time and talk about purple rain. And he used to dress in the outfits that was the era that Saint Germain lived in. He used to have those sort of velvet long jackets and the frilly shirts and stuff like that. And it just made perfect sense that he was Saint Germain. So I asked him, I said to him, and this is something that Charlie gave me the memory of, because I asked him that same question. I said to Prince, if you're an ascended master here on earth, what was the thing that challenged you the most being human? And he said the human ego. He said it's really easy to get the human ego slip you up. He said there were times as a rock star that he let his ego run away with him, thinking that he was better than others. It's an egoic stance. It's any thought that makes you feel separate to anyone, whether you feel less than or better than. It's a thought of separation. That's the point of the ego. Heidi's saying yes, and Charlie's basically saying the same thing. Because he was so highly intellectual, he let the intellect inform him instead of the heart. One of his missions here was to connect the intellect and the heart. And one of his missions actually here was to do that inside politics. So politics is very, head-centered and not so much heart-centered. And one of the things, like the reason he was such a staunch Christian, he wanted to bring that spiritual attribute back into politics, because I think that, politics, Christianity or religion used to rule politics in our history, but it was corrupt politics, corrupt religion, because they were saying, God deems this and God deems that, and God deems that you're a bad person, so behead them and all this sort of stuff. So at some point, and I don't know when, maybe some of you know, they separated God and state, and then there was religion, and then there was politics, and they didn't come together. And so that, when the head is not connected to the heart, and really spirituality is around the vortex of the heart. That's what Jesus Christ spoke about, the heart, the heart, the heart. The heart informs the head instead of the head informing the heart. And so he said, just like Prince said, that he let that intellect run away with him. And when he had ideas, but he always said he was open to debate what he believed and to come back to the heart. That staunch Christian or religious ideas that he had always brought him back to the heart. He also told me that had he lived longer, he would have worked this out and been much more open and much more heart-centered in later years. But that wasn't his spiritual contract in this lifetime. But his spiritual contract was to bring spirituality back into politics. He did it in the form of religion. I don't speak about spirituality in the form of religion, because I sort of look at history and how religion has, tried to control people. Like I said, saying that God deems this and God deems that, making God the overlord who doles out the commandments and of right and wrong. And when you speak to dead people, when you have NDEs, you realize that there's no overlord deeming out commandments of right and wrong. I know that Charlie was very much into his morality. And again, I saw someone debate him on this about morality. He was saying, where does it come from? And this college student was saying, our society and this and that, our upbringing and our society and our parents' beliefs and our school's beliefs. And I think that Charlie wanted to say morality comes from God. God has the the end say what's right and wrong. That's what the church says, but actually that's not what when you speak to spirit guides and people on the other side, they always say that you are given free will to believe in anything. You can create heaven or hell on earth depending on what you believe. And so there is no right and wrong. There is just what you're choosing to believe. And most people, when they live a life, any life really, they want to feel that reconnection to their source. And that reconnection to their source is that reconnection to feeling good. Because as I discussed with Carolann last week, we spoke about spiritual connection and maintaining a spiritual connection. And it's about maintaining that connection to feeling good. So often when you're making people wrong, you might feel good in the moment of feeling like you're right about something and they're wrong. But when you really drill it down, making someone feel wrong never really feels good. Think about having a conversation with where you're in alignment with somebody and how exciting that is. And you discover new things together. I do it on the show all the time. I put people on the show who are of a similar ideas about the universe as me, and they've had experiences that I haven't had, and they expand my point of view and I expand their point of view, but we're in alignment with what we're saying. And the exhilaration and the thrill of that conversation is just so enlightening. It's so beautiful. That's why I keep doing what I'm doing. But when you're having an argument with somebody and you're making someone wrong, you might feel good about being right, but it never really feels good. So your ultimate guide is not some overlord telling you what's right or wrong. It's that feeling within you being in alignment with your source. When you're feeling good, the better you feel, the more in alignment, the more connected you are. And he's agreeing with me, and he was saying, yes, I was coming to know that. Yes, I was coming to know that. The overwhelming thing that I noticed online, rather than talking to him in spirit, was how much love people had for him that knew him personally, and how much respect they had for him. They said, he helped me do this. He helped me get my first job. He encouraged me to do what I liked. And the energy I feel from him, like him or hate him, is kind of like this father energy, as we understand fathering energy. It's like a nurturing, it's like somebody that's rooting for your dreams. I can't even describe what a fathering energy feels like, but it's this overarching protection, nurturing. He really held that sort of fathering energy, which was really interesting. Oh, I'm not looking at this. Heidi says that makes so much sense. I met Prince. What are you saying here? I met Prince way before he became famous. Did you? My mum's best friend's daughter's dated his drummer. Oh, there you go, Heidi. That's so cool. Yeah, Prince was amazing to talk to after he died. And I paid no attention to him when he was alive, but after he died, I'm like, whoa. And then I was like looking online, much like I'm doing with Charlie Kirk, looking online, like, who are you? Who are you? And listening to what people said. But I remember one guy who said that he lived with, he worked for Prince. And he said that people who lived in the house with him used to see him walking down the hall and they'd say, I'd swear he was floating. I swear I didn't see his feet touch the ground, which you can write off as like, they worshipped him. He could walk on water. He could do no wrong. He could walk on water. But when you spoke to his spirit and you realized how huge he was too, it's like, I believe these things. Is there anything he would like to say about President Trump from a spiritual perspective? Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so what he's saying straight away is he's saying, like me, Trump has a job to do. Like him or hate him, everyone in history that is big like this, even Hitler had a job to do. Like him or hate him, most people hate him. Everyone has a job to do, but Trump has a job to do. I don't really know much about Trump's politics either. To tell you the truth, I can't really listen to him talk online. I don't love him and I don't hate him. I feel from that spiritual perspective, there's something going on that my logical perspective doesn't really understand, my human perspective doesn't understand, but it is big. And in history, we'll look back at this time and we'll say, this happened because of this incident, like things changed because of this incident. We are in this exponential shift in our world, moving, as I say, from that ego-centered opinionated, separate consciousness into a more unified consciousness, bringing the head into the heart, letting the heart inform the head instead of the head inform the heart. And there are people in place that are stirring up the world, stirring up people, creating chaos, that is helping people come back to their heart, because staying in their head is just too painful. A bit like what Dave Byron said to me, who was in my book, you know, staying in that judgment and that grief, being angry at the people that put the bomb in the nightclub that killed his daughter, and being angry at the terrorists, and staying in that this shouldn't happen, these are terrible people, staying in that judgment. It's just too painful. And you can't live with that pain. So you have to change yourself. You might not be able to change the terrorists, but you can change yourself. And so, as we've discussed on the show a lot of times, the chaos is ramping up in the world because it's bringing to the surface a lot of the hidden subconscious belief systems that the world has been running on. And a lot of them is, you know, a lot of those systems is that I'm separate to you, and if I feel separate to you, then you mean nothing to me. You know, like when I was talking to Carolann last week, and we were talking about Lady Diana, Princess Diana, when she died, I couldn't believe how many people were mourning, were so upset, emotionally upset about her death. And I had this thought, they didn't know her personally. Why are they so upset? And within 24 hours, I'm bawling my eyes out too. It was like this energy just caught me, and I was just crying and crying and crying. Everyone was crying, and somebody said it opened people's heart chakra of the world. Maybe it did, but, you know, is opening this heart chakra a sad thing? Does it mean that we have to cry, or can we come at more compassion with people, like listening to what people have to say instead of staying staunch in our point of view? So it's interesting that I'm just checking in with him. It's interesting that he was so staunch in his point of view, and yet he kept saying he wanted to discuss and debate people. He wanted to discuss and okay, he's reminding me that debate that he had, where he came at people with that intellect, with that sharp intellect, and he made people think, how can I get my point across in a more articulate way, really sort of help people think that way. He wasn't an advocate of college, and yet he was making kids on college campuses think in ways that many of the university professors were not. Because what happens when you go to school, you rote learning, right? You're not debating with, well, they're showing me that there are many kids that are debating, but it's not really the curriculum to sort of challenge the information you're given. You're just given information, and it's said, like, learn this is right, rather than saying, what do you think about this information? Do you think it's right or wrong? So this is something that Charlie was wanting college kids to do, was to think about something rather than just learn something. I think that you know, the LGBTQ plus community were angry at Charlie because he had these very Christian point of views and morality. But at the same time, what time is it? At the same time, as I was looking at him online this week, I saw him not make people wrong. There were many times when people accused him of being racist, and then he would introduce one of his best mates who was a black guy and said, this is like one of my best mates. What do you mean I'm racist? And so a lot of people had a lot of opinions about him that weren't necessarily right, because they just came at it from their own point of view. Once you decide something about somebody, and then you don't want your mind to be changed because you've decided that this person doesn't agree with what I agree with, so therefore they're wrong. And again, his message in all of this was just to keep thinking, keep diving in, keep looking. And that's what I did this week. When I saw things that I didn't agree with, I'm like, what else did he say? What else did he say? What else did he say? And yeah. And he says to me, again, I'm going to repeat this, that he polarized it because that polarization, that divisiveness created attention, and he wanted to attract attention. And boy, has he done that. I mean, God, you know, I don't even know who he was. And they're having these parades, and people are writing songs about him. I think I've seen at least a dozen songs online. People are writing songs about him. They'll make movies about him. It's like he was like this famous rock star. Kerry, though, almost seems like the name Turning Point has a new meaning now. Oh, what do you mean by that? I remember there was in Australia, there was I don't know if it still exists, a personal growth program called Turning Point, where you would go and look at yourself and start looking at, what you believed about yourself and having those that turning point. I think there's even a movie called Turning Point. What do you mean that Turning Point has a new meaning? I don't really know the politics behind Turning Point at all. I haven't gone that into it, but I'm asking Charlie now, and he is saying, he's basically reiterating what I said. The turning point is to let the heart inform the head rather than the head inform the heart. He said there were many times where he failed to do that, but he always came back to the heart. He always came back to the heart, and he always reassessed his opinions. Not all of them, he's saying, not all of them, but he was young. We've got a lifetime to do this. It's Charlie's nonprofit. It's called the Turning Point USA. Yeah, it's his nonprofit, but I actually don't really know what they stand for. Do you? I haven't looked about that. What he's just saying is turning people's opinions from feeling divided and separated to feeling more unified. And yet many people, when they talk about him, they say he was really a divisive figure. And because of his views, his Christian views and his political views, because he was very much on one side of the political camp, but he was willing to listen to the other side. This is something I've thought about many times. When you watch Australian politics, I don't do it too often, but I've watched it a few times. They have a thing called Question Time in the Parliament, and it's aired on the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Commission Network, ABC, same like American Broadcasting Commission. Anyway, it's aired, and you can watch it. And I've watched it a couple of times, maybe half a dozen times. And all I saw were people throwing out, just insulting, like across this room, this lovely decorated room, leather seats, all that sort of thing, like in parliaments, just slinging mud at each other. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And I just think, how can politics, how can we evolve as a civilization if politicians just want to make the other side wrong? I mean, really, when you look into the future world, what we're looking at is politics starts to dissolve in the way that it operates now. And really that democratic not opinion, but idea, concept becomes more truthful. Today, we call this a democracy, but it's actually not a democracy. They just like you to think it's a democracy, so they create an appearance of a democracy, but it's not a democracy. But in the future, there will be a real democracy where there will be a group, a council of people that oversee the world, but it really listens to the people. And there is no one side or the other side. There is just a group of people that come together that listen to what the people want, and it's decided upon, but it really comes from a more spiritual perspective, a more unified perspective than what we've got today in our politics all over the world. I think Western politics, as corrupt as it is a lot less corrupt than East, like politicians across the world in Eastern countries. I don't know if you've seen the news in Nepal. Nepal's people have overthrown their government. They burnt down parliament. They kicked out the government because they were so corrupt. This has happened many times in small countries like Nepal, where governments have been overthrown by the people. The people are just unhappy about the corruption within the politics, because they said they started this new party years ago. I was listening to it the other day, and there was this group of people that were politicians, and they just were like getting all the wealth of the country, and all their kids were really wealthy, and they were living these lavish lifestyles, and then the people of the land got really angry because the politicians were rich and their children were rich and their friends were rich, and they just got so angry that they just burnt down the government and they kicked them out. I mean, because it was so corrupt. So when you look at Western politics, maybe it is as corrupt as the Eastern politics. Who knows? I don't know. I did meet a politician in 2020 who talked about career politicians versus real politicians. And I said, tell me about that. And she said, oh, most people go into politics because it's a career and they're going to make a lot of money and they're going to get a lot of status. But then there are like real politicians that actually want to make a difference in the world. She said, they're few and far between. It's mostly the career politics. You go into politics because it's considered, a status job and you'll earn good money. So, yeah, the political climate of our world really needs to change. And I think both Trump, love them or hate them, and Charlie were a part of that. We're at the beginning of this stage and where a lot of the corruption is being exposed. A lot of it's being exposed and they're a part of that. As I say, love them or hate them. Moving to a world where the heart informs the head rather than the head informing the heart. Any questions? Any more questions? I'm just going to remind you all that you're listening to Elevate Consciousness, the awareness shift, waking the quantum self. And we are chatting about Charlie Kirk. I said I was going to chat about Robert as well on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, syndicated radio on 107.7 and 105.3 FM. Through the Gulf Coast and New Orleans and all over the place. We're on 8 platforms today. Robert Redford has just left the planet. He has not, I have to say, he has not come through as clearly as Charlie did. But I did have a little bit of a chat just before I went live, and I connected with him and I got him. Not as strongly, but I got him. And I said, what would you like to say? And he said his activism and his political stance was more important to him than his acting career. When you look online, everyone's going to show you how handsome he is and talk about what movies he was in and talk about what movie stars what leading ladies he worked with. And all the leading ladies are going to talk about how it was to work with Robert Redford and how it was to get, that will be the conversation that we're focused on. And he wants to say that he was much more passionate about his activism and his political stance. I don't really know what his politics was. He was probably conservative too, but he was very passionate about climate change. Some people say there's no such thing as climate change. Some people say it's the most important thing to talk about in the world, but that was much more. He was a thinking man as well. He used that public stage of being an actor. He really enjoyed being an actor. He said he loved it. He was like the thinking man's actor. And you can see that in the role. So interesting, because only the other night I was looking for something to watch, and I rewatched Out of Africa, a movie that I had seen a million times. I watched it because the woman, Meryl Streep, plays the woman in it, and she's from Denmark, and her name is KAren. And she introduces herself as Karen. This is why I love this movie so much, because my mother called me Karen as well. It's the Scandinavian pronunciation of the name Karen. And every time she introduced herself as Karen, everyone called her Karen. I always think to myself, I know how you feel, love. But at the end of the movie, I taped it actually, she's leaving Africa. It's a tragic movie, but Robert Redford stars in it. And she asks her manservant, she says, "You never say my name. Please tell me my name," because he always called her Sabu, I think, which means mistress or something. And he said, "Your name is Karen." And he says it like that. And I'm like, yes, he got it right. And then she leaves. But Robert Redford was in that. And I so enjoyed watching him. I hadn't thought about Robert Redford for years and years and years. And I watched Out of Africa. And there he was, the beautiful Robert Redford. And 2 days later, he leaves the planet. When I saw the news, I thought, really? Is this true? Is this true? Why would I doubt it? But yeah. So his message is that he used his Hollywood career to get attention to really what he wanted to talk about this planet. And he says he's not finished with this world either, that he'll be back. So yeah, any other questions about, you want to chat to either of them in spirit? I'm going to do a Spirit Speaks again soon, and we'll do talking to people on the other side, what they've got to say. I'll invite somebody else to come on with me who can do this as well. I'm just asking Charlie if he has a message. He's saying, don't let your hatred override your view of this world, inform you. Don't let your divisiveness, your opinions of right or wrong, override your loving heart, your desire to feel connected, to feel heard, to feel like you belong, that you belong in this world, that you belong to each other. Don't let the opinions, your opinions or the opinions of others, tear you apart from your friends, from your family, because a lot of this is going on within families. I just said to him then, it's all in the negative. Don't let. And he said, yeah, it is. I said, can we put it in the affirmative? Yeah, a lot of people have different opinions about things, and they let those different opinions tear them apart. They don't speak to each other because they have differing opinions. You can always find, he says, you can always find a common ground. I've been swimming with a friend of mine in the mornings. He's in his 80s. He's completely informed by the legacy media. He believes everything that comes out of their mouth. And so we have different opinions on many things. We never convince each other that the other side is right or wrong, but it doesn't mean that we're not friends. And so what I talk about with him, rather than sort of political stuff, stuff that, because he doesn't believe in anything I do. He doesn't believe in psychic ability and all that stuff. He sort of listens, but he doesn't believe. We talk about things where we have common ground, and that's where we maintain our friendship. What are you saying here, Isabella? Charlie was adamant and very vocal that the Epstein files should be released. Does Charlie think that Trump will ever release them? Well, the first word I got was no. He's laughing. But he said that they will be released. And he said that the majority of them have been released. And he's laughing because he feels like that's so unimportant in the greater scheme of things. Okay, he's saying that that's just more of you can let the uncovering of corruption. Corruption is being uncovered. My guide said to me years ago, what time is it? We've got 10 minutes left, that the light is expanding on planet Earth, and as more light energy hits the earth, it uncovers all the darkness. And they explained it to me like this. They said, remember when you were young and you went to the disco? It wasn't really the disco, the nightclub, and maybe you stayed there all night, and in that dark room with lights, and everyone looks beautiful, and then at the end of the evening they put on the bright lights and kick everybody out of the pub or the disco or the nightclub. And when the bright lights come on, you see all the dirt everywhere, and everyone doesn't look as beautiful as they did in the dark lights. They just use this funny analogy to make me laugh. They said it's a bit like that. It's like when the lights are turned up, you get to see all the dirt, and nothing looks as beautiful when the lights are really bright. And they're saying that this is that's what's happening on planet Earth now. A lot of things are being revealed, so we can get focused on the corruption and be into that's terrible and that's awful and this is good and bad, or we can get focused on how the light is illuminating this world. We can't let go of corruption until we see it, because when it's covert and hidden and it doesn't exist, it doesn't go away. It has to come to the light to leave. And so this is what's happening on planet Earth right now. And he's saying that this assassination is all a part of that. As I said last week, Leslie said, I, regardless of what his spiritual contract was, I don't want to live in a world with this kind of violence. So again, that is the prayer of many people. I don't want to live in a world with this kind of violence. And so how do we not live in a world with this kind of violence? Who do you have to be to create more peace on earth? I mean, who do you have to be, and how do you spread that love and that peace? I mean, who do you have to be to spread that love and peace on earth if you don't want to live in a world with that kind of violence where somebody kills another person because they don't agree with them for their opinions? Who do you have to be? Not for their actions, but for their opinions. Interestingly enough, as I was chatting to the mob, the guides this morning about that, I saw somebody say it's unfathomable that somebody could assassinate somebody just because of his opinion, that they didn't agree with his opinion or his ideas. And they said to me, every murder, every crime, every war is all over ideas and opinion. It's all about opinion and ideas. And I'm like, it is, isn't it? Like, you have an idea that the other person's wrong, so you kill them. And then that person says, you've done this terrible thing to us, so I'm going to retaliate. And then you kill them. And then this other person says, you've done this. And it's just this chain of pain that goes back and forth and back and forth. Look what's happening in, Israel and other places, Gaza. It's all about opinion. It's all about opinion and divisiveness and making the other person wrong. Whether it's wrapped in religion or wrapped in politics, it's all opinions. So how can you live in a world where you're the peacemaker? You can see both points of view. You can see both sides. You can find common ground even when you disagree with somebody. He's making me cry. So if anything is divisive and polarized as a personality that he was, this is really his message. Because I kept saying last week, his message will be heard, will be remembered. And I'm like, what is his message? What is his message? It's like, keep talking to each other, keep debating. Don't stay stuck in your point of view. Yeah. And Robert, both Charlie and Robert Redford had the same first name and died very close to one another. Yeah. Charles, I didn't know Charles was Charles Robert Redford. Geographically just outside the city of Provo, Utah. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I see that synchronicity too. He was like, Robert Redford was your thinking man's actor. He wasn't just a pretty face, as they say. He was a thinking man's actor, and he was concerned about this world. He wasn't just all about me and being famous and my accolades and my awards and how many Academy Awards I've got and how many movies I've made. He was much deeper than that. He was really concerned about, he was more global. Today in Australia is the 18th of September. We're on a 999 day. I know that it's only the 17th in the States, but 9 stands for evolution, evolving, and it stands for humanity, and it stands for change. And we've had a couple of 999s because we're in a 9-year and a 9-month on a 9-day. So on the 9th of the 9th, 2025 was a 999. Everyone was talking about the 999 portal. And today is another 999 portal. And on the 27th, it'll be another 999 portal. So in numerology, 1 stands for self and 8 stands for infinity. And it also stands for business, the way the world works. Some people say that, the Chinese say that the 8's very much about money and prosperity. And a lot of numerologists say that too. But the way the world works, the business of the world, and how, where you stand in it. And together, that the business of the world and where you stand in it, the self, they come together and create the 9, which is about all of us, about unity and humanity. So we're on this 999 portal, and these 2 amazing thinkers, love them or hate them, have left the planet in this month of September. Yeah, that synchronicity. So the 27th is another powerful day. 2 stands for service, and 7 stands for, in numerology, spirituality. And the 2 and the 7 come together and they create the 9. So on the 27th, it's like, how do you serve humanity through your spirituality? How are you serving humanity through your spirituality? What is it? Okay, so I'm being given, what I'm saying is this, you, Charlie, they're saying there's a mob, there's a group of us here being given to ask you 2 minutes to go, to ask the people that are listening to this, both of the recording and the live, to go and find someone that you've had a disagreement with and to mend those bridges, be it with a friend or a relative or a neighbor or anyone you know, and to find a common ground. Yeah, to create that unity where you've had division. I did this years ago when I was in my 30s. I was fighting with my ex-husband, I was fighting with my brother, and I was fighting with my father. And I did this personal growth course, and it asked us to clean up all the messes that we've made in our life. Like, anyone that you're not talking to, you've created that mess, regardless if you think they're wrong or you're wrong, right? And they asked us to mend that. And I did that. It was the best thing that I've ever done in my life. So this is the challenge that the spirit side is giving you. Can you create more unity in your life with those that disagree with you and that you disagree with? So somebody that's been speaking about this stuff for years, channeling, speaking to spirit guides and channeling, and talks about Sasquatch and ETs and other planets and extraterrestrials. I've had a lot of people ridicule me and judge me and call me wrong. It doesn't mean that I stopped loving them. I had these close girlfriends for many years, and about a decade ago they just couldn't cope with me any longer, and they just decided they didn't want to speak with me. Some of them I still speak with. I bring up every now and then, and there's a lot of love still there. But we speak about common ground, time to go. We speak about family. We speak about, kids and all that sort of thing. Thank you, darling. What an amazing final message. Yeah, it is. Thank you. Thank you for listening. And I hope that you can find the beauty in this horrific incidents, because that's the message that's come through. Where can you find common ground with people that you disagree with? Big love to all of you. And coming up on ATP, we're going to talk ETs this Sunday evening, Monday morning in Australia, Sunday evening, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 3:30 p.m. Pacific Time. We're going to talk the Ponti, who are ETs that have been living on Earth and been visiting Earth since before humans were here. And we're going to speak to a couple of people who are in direct communication with them. And so that's coming up on ATP. Big love to all of you. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.